On October 17th, a student from the Kerch Polytechnical College in occupied Crimea detonated a bomb and started a school shooting using a shotgun. The gruesome incident left 21 dead, mostly teenagers, and over 65 injured. To discuss this, we welcome to the studio Arsen Zhumadilov. He's advisor to the head of the Mejlis of the Crimean Tatar people. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Let's kind of break down this incident, and what we want to maybe start first talking about is when initial reports come out. And unfortunately, being an American, school shootings are all too common and often not really given a lot of coverage anymore. And when we look at how a society initially, the initial reports they put out, and for example, in America, it's often comes down to some maybe people in society who are, we'll say, Muslims, or you have these people who become the enemies, in a sense, you could say. So for in this case, what were some of the first things that were coming out of Russian media?
Well, first of all, I'd like to convey my message of condolences to all the families of the victims and of those who were wounded, and I wish all those who are wounded that I wish them quick recovery.
Absolutely.
And as for what you asked, indeed, the tragedy actually and the perception of the tragedy is aggravated by the fact that it has never been there, that we in Crimea and actually in Ukraine as a whole, for 27 years of Ukraine's independence, we have never witnessed such a tragedy like a school shooting. As you said, in the US, unfortunately, it's quite a common thing, but it has never been a common thing in Ukraine. We have never seen such things in Crimea. Russians, they claim that they apply so much effort to, combat terrorism, extremism. They have, many thousands or maybe millions of siloviks, as they call them, yes, the law enforcement officers and agents. But they missed it, and it was under their control in occupied Crimea that it was the first time in Ukraine's history we have such an attack. And they, as you say, they started, when they started, reporting about this problem, the first idea was to, shift the blame towards the Crimean Tatars, saying that, a man who started shooting looked like a Crimean Tatar, looked like a Tatar. It was it is now a citation from Lenta.ru, which is quite a,
major,
quite a popular media outlet in Russia. And but then, unfortunately for them, there were, numerous reports coming out, saying that a man who started shooting was actually the college student. He was Russian. He looked very much like Russian, so he had, pale face, blonde hair, etc. And this is when they then, they stopped this, rhetoric when they blamed the Crimean Tatars.
And initially, also, they were saying that it was a terrorist attack, which would be something that I suppose would be more useful than a mass murder.
Absolutely, this is a very good point. Indeed, firstly, their reaction, and as far as we know, their prosecutor's office started investigation upon an article of terror attack.
Right.
And I was actually very doubtful that it was actually a terror attack. Why? Because
initially, yes, absolutely.
Yeah, why? Because when a terror attack is, committed, somebody usually claims responsibility for it. Why? Because when somebody carries out a terror attack, he or she does it for quite clear political purposes. Right. And he or she after doing so and after having such a great, public resonance, he or she would like to come out and say, look, this is us, we did it because of this, this and that.
Right.
And, we had 1 hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, etc., when nobody stepped out saying that, look, this is us, we did it. Therefore, for me, it was very much clear that it was not a terror attack. Why? Because nobody claimed responsibility. Second, I'm pretty much aware of this, of the, societal groups, social, ethnic, religious groups in Crimea. To my best knowledge, there is not a single group that operates under undercover, preparing terror attacks in Crimea. The struggle that we Crimean Tatars, as a major ethnic groups which opposes the occupation, is totally non-violent, is purely peaceful, and we've been emphasizing this for many decades now, for many times. And it is indeed so. It is in our genes that we fight for our struggle in a peaceful, non-violent way. This is why when they said that it was probably a terrorist and the terrorist looked like a Tatar, I knew 99.9% that it was a total lie, just for to shift the blame for the first couple of hours, then to understand what happened actually.
Well, and there was also this attempt. Not only I think the attempt also was made to shift this blame. So this is something that Ukraine did. That they said. So there's all of this initial where you can see this true beliefs come to the surface here is immediately blaming Ukraine, blaming Tatars.
It is very symptomatic indeed. It is a very good point indeed. What they did is that they tried to show the Crimean Tatars and the Ukrainians in bad light, saying that, look, this is probably Ukraine, or these were probably Crimean Tatars who did that. And it is very symptomatic that whatever wrong happens in Russia, it is their first best idea to, try to blame Ukraine or the Crimean Tatars for whatever, went wrong in Russia. But the thing is that actually the Russian society, unfortunately, needs help. It needs support. Why? Because they, for many years now, they've been hearing from their news, from, every single TV channel that, broadcasts in Russia. They see this, increasing militarization, as we call it. That is, Russia glorifies war. It glorifies those who fight in DOnbas. It glorifies those who, fell victims in Syria. And people, when they look at it, they, they really have a new idol, a new cult, which is Russian weaponry, Russian, might, Russian power. And some of them, whose psychology is probably weak, or actually not mature, like we have this 18 years old, actually young man, they they think that for them to be a part of this big story, it is a good idea to take a gun and start shooting. We actually we deal with a case when society as a whole needs assistance, and I very much hope that sooner or later the Russian regime will ease its grip over the society, and the society will actually start, rediscovering itself in a peaceful way.
Well, and you mentioned with the glorification of military, of things like this. And one thing of special interest is the readily availability of weapons and ammunition. So, we have this CCTV video showing it's Vladislav Roslakov buying ammunition, so buying shotgun shells. Yeah. Now, how easily accessible is this in Crimea? And has this always been the case, that weaponry is so easy to purchase? We know in mainland Ukraine that's not the case.
It is not the case in Ukraine. It had never been the case in Crimea before 2014. As I mentioned before, we in Crimea had never had a single incident like that. They in Russia, they have different laws, which indeed, make it legally available for young men like this 18 years old student to buy the weaponry, to buy the ammunition, and to do it in an actually legal way. And this is actually one very big, this case, poses one very big question to the Russian occupational authorities in Crimea and to the Russian regime as a whole. When they stepped in to Crimea in 2014, when they started their military invasion to Crimea, their major argument was that they were there to protect the citizens, to protect the people, to increase the level of security. Now, when 4 years after that, we see that they actually failed the promise that they gave to the people in Crimea, to the world, actually saying that, look, what we do here is a good thing because we will protect these citizens from whoever in Kiev. Now, we in Kiev, since then, we have never had an incident like that. In Crimea, they had never seen an incident like that before 2014. The Russians failed to deliver upon their promise. And it poses a very big questions to them. Are you really serious when you still carry on saying that your presence in Crimea is for the better of those people who live in Crimea? Now, this incident, it clearly shows us that it is not the case. If sooner or later we see Russians live in Crimea, I'm quite sure that Crimea will become a peaceful place once again, as it was before 2014.
Well, and we see, as you're saying, this is such evidence of the militarization of the country. And as well, it will be interesting to see what more comes out about this student, and if he is a resident of Crimea, or if he moved there from mainland Russia, and kind of to track what the story of this student is. But we also realize that that might be very difficult to know. We're pretty sure that they may have already taken down his profile from social media and trying to rewrite the narrative. We've seen screenshots from his profile showing his love and photos that show Putin as an emperor, of his photos that are glorifying the so-called Donetsk Republic. So it'll be interesting to see what comes to light and how that compares to the actual truth, which we can definitely expect not to be such the case.
Well, I actually read, I've been reading some of Russian media today to see what kind of accents they now make today, when the picture is pretty much clear. So now what they try to explain the society about the tragedy is that the young man was probably a psycho. He was a very strange student. He had no friends. So they want just to show that it is a case which cannot be judged as if it is a systematic case, as if it shows to a bigger problem. They want to show as if it is a major deviation, which will not happen with anybody else, because the young man was a psycho.
And the fear with that is which has been the case in the U.S. initially, and they continue to do that. And as we've seen, unfortunately, in the history of the U.S. with school shootings, is that it is a sign of a system that is creating kind of these conditions where you have students who are not supported, who end up resulting to this type of action. And it is a sign of a major issue, a major illness within the system, and not just isolated people. So it will be very unfortunate what will happen in the future, and also how Russia responds to this. It's already been reported that they say they'll guard all schools now with National Guardsmen carrying automatic weapons. Now, this is something that has been put up in the U.S. as a case of handling shootings in kindergartens, for unfortunately, that to put armed guards everywhere. And the idea is that this cannot prevent this, and maybe even encourage more situations where people try to defy this. So it's going to be something to see how this develops. One last question I have for you is, the prosecutor's office of the Autonomous Republic of Crimea, located here in Ukraine, has opened a criminal case on this. And the President Poroshenko has said that this is because what happens in occupied Crimea, this is territory of Ukraine, and Ukrainian citizens deserve, they are citizens of the country, of Ukraine. So what are your thoughts on the opening of this criminal investigation, and where could it lead?
Well, I think that it is a very good step. It is a right thing to do, because whatever happens in Crimea, it is a territory of Ukraine. And second, we have very many citizens of Ukraine who are there in Crimea. This is why it is absolutely no doubt that our prosecutors it is their obligation actually to investigate these cases. The other question is whether this will lead to anywhere, because we understand that they will not be able to collect the evidence, they will not be able to ask people about what happened, to ask witnesses, interrogate people maybe even, you know. But it is a right thing to do. They have to do it. Why? Because all these things, they actually pile up in a bigger story. And the biggest story goes as we Ukraine, we will, or we already do it actually, blame Russia for all the misconduct, for all the crimes that they either did on their own as a state, or they overlooked these crimes and they actually jeopardized our citizens because of their negligence.
Well, thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you.
And we will hopefully have you back on when we have more things to discuss on this case. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was Arsen Zhumadilov, advisor of the head of the Mejlis of the Crimean Tatar people. Thank you for watching UATV, and stay tuned for more.